But the president's remarks tonight, I interpreted as they were trying to rebuild, or at least in the early stages of attempting to rebuild in a different location.
Well, that would contradict what Tulsi Gabbard said.
I think what she said was that at the sites we bombed, those were shuttered, but maybe they were trying to rebuild.
The exact words are, there has been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. So she's not talking about the sites. She's talking about their enrichment capability.
Okay, well, so I heard the president tonight say that our belief is that they...
In today's video, Abby Phillip shuts down Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip. When you look at what actually defines victory in modern conflicts, it's not just about hitting targets, it's about eliminating the threat. And historically, that's where things get complicated. Even after major military campaigns, countries have still been able to rely on asymmetric tactics, things like proxy groups, missile strikes, and naval disruption to stay in the fight. And that's exactly what's happening here. The Strait of Hormuz is still a huge factor, carrying about 20% of global oil. And as long as that remains vulnerable, Iran still holds leverage no matter how many strikes happen elsewhere. But before we dive into today's video, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one.
So Tulsi Gabbard is under oath. The president is giving a speech at the White House. But I think it's an open question how truthful he was being about that particular statement. And it's important because the nuclear material is still in Iran. Mm-hmm. It is still in Iran, and we've done nothing to get it out.
If the goal of the war is to stop Iran from developing nukes, then we have no way to actually verify if they have enriched uranium. If the goal of the war is to defang their ability to fund proxies in the Middle East, they are now more rich because they're tolling people through the Strait of Hormuz, and that is making them a lot of money. We've created an environment where Iran is gaining money due to the sanctions lifted on oil. Iran is gaining money because they're going to start tolling ships. And on top of that, this administration is not just changing objectives every single day, they're lowering the threshold for what victory is considered as. So first it was regime change, as you said. Israel named this Operation Roaring Lion, which indicates the return of the Shah. It's regime change. Then they realized that's a really hard task. We're going to just talk about weapons of mass destruction now. That one kind of works sometimes. And they realized, okay, we have no way to actually verify that as well. So now we're in a situation where people on TV are listing off, oh, we've destroyed their Air Force. We've destroyed their Navy. Their Air Force was gifted to them 55 years ago by the United States. So was the Navy. Their Air Force and their Navy were not significant threats to the United States. They were ancient. They were ancient as hell. They were old. So what have we gotten from this? We've destroyed their ancient fleets. We haven't actually secured the enriched uranium, and they're richer for it. They have control over the Strait of Hormuz and can continue to exert control over the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not seeing the victory here.
Why can't Trump get his story straight about the nukes? That's so central to this whole thing. The administration is saying all kinds of different things about it and not leveling with the American people.
Well, I saw the president's remarks, and I see what you said, Tulsi said. My understanding of how they positioned it was that the bombing we did last summer was at a specific location. But the president's remarks tonight, I interpreted as they were trying to rebuild, or at least in the early stages of attempting to rebuild in a different location.
Well, that would contradict what Tulsi Gabbard said.
I think what she said was that at the sites we bombed, those were shuttered, but maybe they were trying to rebuild.
The exact words are, there has been no efforts since then to try to rebuild their enrichment capability. So she's not talking about the sites. She's talking about their enrichment capability.
Okay, well, so I heard the president tonight say that our belief is that we bombed them, they tried to rebuild, and then of course we know they told our negotiators that they had enough enriched uranium to build 11 nuclear bombs. So that is the data set that he was working off of when he made the decision. I also heard him say tonight that we're planning to do, at least initially, satellite monitoring on the nuclear material at the moment because it's buried. And so if they make a move towards it, we'll be able to know that. Now, I think what went unsaid tonight, but what I assume is happening in the background in these diplomatic conversations, is that part of the way this is going to end is hostilities will cease at some point. We'll have some kind of diplomatic end that has to include getting the nuclear material. He didn't say that tonight. I hope that would be a great scenario if it works out that way.
He didn't say that.
And he also didn't say
he did not say that.
Now, uranium once enriched doesn't just disappear after a strike. Experts have long pointed out that nuclear programs can be delayed, but rarely eliminated entirely through military action alone. countries can rebuild, relocate, or even accelerate efforts underground. That's why most non-proliferation strategies combine diplomacy, inspections, and enforcement, not just force. Then there's the economic angle Adam is hinting at, which is actually pretty significant. The Strait of Hormuz carries about 20% of global oil supply, and any control or disruption there gives Iran leverage. Even the perception of risk can drive up global prices, and if Iran is able to benefit from that, whether through oil sales or strategic positioning, it complicates the idea that they've been weakened overall. There's also the issue of shifting goals. In past conflicts, when objectives keep changing, it usually signals that the original plan didn't fully account for reality. We saw that in Iraq when the mission evolved multiple times, and it made it harder to define success. When the benchmark for winning keeps getting adjusted, people start questioning whether there was a clear endpoint to begin with. And finally, the messaging inconsistency matters more than it seems. In national security situations, mixed signals from leadership don't just confuse the public. They can affect how allies and adversaries respond. If different officials are saying different things about something as critical as nuclear capability, it raises doubts about how solid the intelligence or strategy actually is. So the bigger point here is that this isn't just about whether progress was made. It's about whether there's a verifiable, consistent path forward. Because without that, it becomes really hard to say what's actually been achieved.
And it's more than just that he didn't say that. He actually proposed an alternative, which you just pointed out, which is that we would just perpetually surveil and bomb them if they ever attempted to get the nuclear material that is still in their territory. Christiane Amanpour was on earlier tonight. It's talking about this. It's called a mow the lawn scenario. That's great for Israel because they're right there. But for us, are we really going to just perpetually be poised to bomb Iran until the end of time?
I mean, at this point, you have the Saudis and the Emiratis wanting to enter into this conflict, proposing resolutions at the UN Security Council to reopen the Strait of Hormuz through the United Nations. So this is not just us going it alone. I mean, that monitoring is relatively easy. We don't even need to be there. You can have the B-2s flying from Missouri all the way across the pond with some KC-135s refueling them and mow that long relatively simply. I think this is the challenge that I don't get about the black pill of the folks who just think that this is all doom and gloom. I mean, when you were talking earlier, it's like the U.S. is losing. We could end it any
I never said we're losing. I just said there's a cost-benefit analysis to happen here, and I see the cost as so high, and the benefit is we destroyed some 55-year-old Air Force. Like what's the benefit here?
Thousands of ballistic missiles.
Wait. If the thousands of ballistic missiles have been, if we have won so decisively, why can't we get a single ship through the Strait of Hormuz? Why won't we even try to escort a ship through the Strait of Hormuz?
What tonight was about, ultimately, what really the president was trying to do tonight is to not box himself in, to try and declare a victory with a slow exit at some point. He is reading the polling right now. He may control the battlefield out in the Middle East. He is losing the living rooms across America. You look at polling, more than half of Americans do not believe they are benefiting financially because of this war. You look at Republicans and Democrats, they don't want this war. They want to get out of it as soon as possible. And when foreign policy is the thing over here, and suddenly you see it showing up in your grocery bill, in your airline fees, and then also, at home in the typical costs for home folks, they start to feel that. And when you feel it at the gas pump, it becomes a real issue for America.
Yeah, Donald Trump had a very good chance tonight to explain his rationale to the American people and lay out what we've gotten. But again, every single weapon system that was actually a threat to us is still intact. You just gloated that we took out thousands of their missiles. Okay, so I keep hearing this line. We've taken out their missiles.
We don't have a Navy
We've taken
anymore.
again. Okay, their Navy and Air Force was 55 years old. What is taking?
Then why was it harassing people in the
What does taking out a 55-year-old Navy
They
mean?
were constantly harassing ships in the Gulf. Now they
They're
can't do that
still
anymore.
harassing.
They're
They
still
don't
doing that.
they don't have any ship left.
No, I'm
ships.
saying, my point is that the main thing that we care about, which is the Strait of Hormuz, which is the global oil supply, they are still, as Trump said, Trump made this point himself, it doesn't take a lot to terrorize ships in that strait.
So the whole idea of just monitor and strike when needed, is basically what analysts call a mow the lawn strategy. You hit targets over and over to keep a threat contained, but you never actually eliminate it. Israel has used versions of this in Gaza for years, and even their own security experts admit it's more about managing conflict, not ending it. Translating that to a country like Iran, which is much larger, more complex, and regionally connected, becomes way riskier. And on the military side, it's not just about what's been destroyed, it's about what still matters. Iran's real strength has never been its old school navy or air force. It's been asymmetric warfare, things like fast attack boats, mines, and proxy networks. That's why even a relatively small capability can still disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, which handles around 20% of global oil supply. You don't need a massive fleet to cause chaos there, you just need unpredictability. Then there's the cost-benefit argument Adam is getting at, and that's huge. The US has spent trillions of dollars on Middle East conflicts over the past 2 decades, and studies have shown that prolonged engagements tend to bring diminishing returns over time. Meanwhile, the costs don't stay overseas. They show up at home. Rising oil prices, higher shipping costs, and inflation all tie back to instability in that region. Rena's point about public opinion is also key. Wars today don't just play out on the battlefield, they play out in people's daily lives. When gas prices go up or travel costs spike, people start questioning the purpose fast. And polling consistently shows that once economic pain kicks in, support for conflicts drops even further, regardless of political affiliation. And finally, there's the strategy question. If ships still aren't moving freely through the strait, if key pressure points are still active, then it raises a real question. What exactly has changed?
They are currently doing it right now.
And if you look at launchings of Iranian drones and missiles, it went down dramatically at the beginning of the war, but it's actually been pretty steady for the last several weeks. They're still able to launch a bunch of drones and missiles every day, and that's all it takes to prevent ships from going through the Strait of Hormuz.
I've asked conservatives time and time again, if we've won so decisively, why can't we open the strait? And they can't give a sufficient answer. The real answer is because Iran has 2 separate navies. They have their conventional navy, which we've destroyed. Then they have the IRGC navy, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps navy. That one is the one that wages asymmetric warfare. And I guess I'll just say one more time, if we've really taken out both of their navies and won so decisively, how come gas prices are very likely to spike another, 20, 30 cents?
We have seen in the past 4 weeks one of the most significant tactical military achievements since the Gulf War. I mean, just a incredible show of strength and of force. I'm talking about the initial one, the happy one that we like to talk about in '91, right? The shock and awe that brought back the American sense of pride in the wake of Vietnam and the defeat there. The fact that the American people are not supporting it has very little to do with what's happened. It has everything to do with the fact that it is trailing in the polling to Donald Trump's approval rating, as is the operation in Venezuela. The operation in Venezuela is 30 points more popular in Venezuela than in the United States.
So wait, so what are you suggesting?
I'm saying that Donald Trump, and he's
you think this is a Trump thing? That's because Trump is so unpopular?
I think that if there was capitulation from day one and Trump was getting a parade down the Grand Boulevard in Tehran, he would still be sitting at the similar approval rating because opinions are
Don't you think Americans are rational about paying $1 more
I've seen very
per
little
gallon of gas? I mean, that seems actually quite rational. I mean, I don't share your skepticism of the American people. I think they understand when they don't think that this, I think they are saying very clearly, they do not think that this step needed to be taken. And that's actually Trump's own fault, because he told them a year ago that he had already done the job. He had already neutralized the nuclear program. So then for him to come back and say, well, we need to wage a war, that seems like a bait and switch. I think Americans are rationally saying, what on earth is that about? And when Trump says NATO is a paper tiger, Putin's like, music to my ears.
I just wish that
he loves
him on that and show they're not a paper tiger.
Yes, you can take out visible targets, but that doesn't always translate into control of the situation. Take the Strait of Hormuz, for example. It's one of the most important choke points in the world, with about 20% of global oil supply moving through it. And right now, that's still being disrupted, not because of a traditional navy, but because of how Iran operates. That's the key point. Iran's strength has never really been its conventional military. Even experts say the real threat comes from the IRGC Navy and asymmetric tactics, things like mines, drones, and small fast boats that are much harder to stop. So even if older ships or aircraft get destroyed, that doesn't actually remove the pressure on shipping lanes. And if ships still can't move freely, then the core problem hasn't been solved. There's also a bigger pattern here. In past conflicts, early military success has often been used to claim victory, but the long-term situation tells a different story. Iraq is probably the clearest example. Initial operations were fast and decisive, but the aftermath dragged on for years because the deeper issues weren't addressed. That's why modern military strategy puts so much emphasis on end goals, not just initial wins. And then there's the economic reality, which Adam is tapping into. When something like Hormuz is unstable, it doesn't stay overseas, it hits people at home. Oil prices react almost immediately, and that affects gas, shipping, and everyday costs. So when Americans see prices going up while being told things are under control, that disconnect becomes hard to ignore. Finally, there's the consistency issue. When messaging keeps shifting what the goals are, what success looks like, it raises real questions about whether there was a clear plan from the start. And historically, when objectives keep changing, it usually means the situation is more complicated than originally presented.